All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this evening for what is essentially the last of our 101 series webinars for the year. Tonight, we're going to be looking at all things you should know in the hospitality, restaurants, wineries and distillery awards and industries. I'm hosting you tonight. My name is Frances Orr. I'm one of the principal HR advisors here at Strawberry Seed Consulting, and along with Helen Dodd, who will be presenting for you tonight. So before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work and meet today, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Helen.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'll say good evening. I'm actually over in WA, so it's not quite evening yet. We're still at 4:30. We'll start off with who we are. So this is the Strawberry Seed Consulting team. Carly, the lovely lady in red, started Strawberry Seed back in 2013, and we've been working with countless small business owners since then, watching them succeed and coaching them successfully through a variety of HR issues. Our team has a genuine passion for people and employment, and we all have a very down-to-earth approach, which has resulted in a business that is built on relationships and trust. And we fit in with other business support, such as your accountant, bookkeeper, lawyer, and business coach. Now, a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the main section. First of all, if you have any questions during the session, please write them into the chat function. We'll be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if we don't answer your question during the presentation, we hopefully will have some time to come to it at the end. Frances will also be monitoring the questions throughout and may also be able to answer directly in the chat function as we go along. And we also want to make mention that the information that we'll be discussing today is general in nature, based on the knowledge that we have gained over the past few years of working with these clients in these industries. And we always recommend that you seek specific advice from a trusted professional or Fair Work about your individual situation, as this may change the outcome of the advice as well. Okay, so some of the topics we're going to cover today, first of all, is governance, employment types and classifications, rates of pay and remuneration, some important policies such as workplace health and safety and sexual harassment, and finally touching on documentation and how important it is, especially in small businesses. So let's start at the beginning. How is the employment relationship governed? So employment is governed by a few different entities. First of all, we've got the Fair Work Act and National Employment Standards. So the NES lays out the minimum entitlements for employees in Australia. It covers things like the national minimum wage, maximum weekly hours, notice of termination and redundancy pays. Then we have the industrial instrument, which would be either an award or enterprise agreement. Both the section of the industry and the types of employees that you have in your business will determine which award or awards apply to your business, or perhaps your business has gone through the process of creating an EBA. Then finally, we have the employment agreement. So this is a document that outlines the legal obligations that both parties, being the employer and the employee, must agree to. The employment contract cannot ever have conditions that are less than what is specified in the award or EBA, and in turn the NES. So essentially, the National Employment Standards anchors both the award and the employment agreement. So if there is nothing else in place, such as a contract or an award that is applicable to an employment relationship, the NES will apply. And this includes stipulated minimum wages, hours, public holidays, and other conditions as well. So what industrial instrument applies to you and your business? The industrial instruments that commonly apply to the hospitality, restaurant, winery and distillery industries include the Hospitality Industry General Award, which covers all types of tourist or residential accommodation, including hotels, motels, serviced apartments, resorts and caravan parks, wine saloons, wine bars and taverns, caterers, casinos, nightclubs, function areas, convention facilities, and restaurants that are connected with an employer covered by the Hospitality Award. For example, a restaurant that is situated at a hotel. Then we've got the Restaurant Industry Award. So this covers businesses that mainly sell food and beverages to be eaten on the premises, such as restaurants, catering by a restaurant, and cafes where the business offers table service. Then we've got the Fast Food Industry Award. Now, this doesn't just apply to places like Hungry Jack's or KFC. It also applies to cafes that sell meals, snacks and beverages that are consumed to be off-site and don't have table service. So, for instance, the little coffee kiosks that are very common these days. There's also the Wine Industry Award, which covers off on the wine industry. It's pretty self-explanatory. The Food, Beverage and Tobacco Manufacturing Award, which would cover places that manufacture, things like gin and vodka and things like that. Now, there's also the possibility that one award or that more than one award applies to your employees. And this is depending on their role in the business as well as the industry that you work in. So while the Hospitality and Restaurant Awards have classifications that cover administrative employees, the Fast Food, Wine and the Food, Beverage and Tobacco Manufacturing Award don't. So if you have administrative employees, those would be, and you have other employees under those final three awards, they would actually be covered by the Clerks Award. Or perhaps you manage a winery that also has a restaurant on site, in which case the restaurant employees would be covered by the Restaurant Award. So it's important to understand which industrial instrument applies to you so that you have an understanding of the obligations such as breaks, penalty rates, allowances and the like, as these are not standard between the awards. Next, we're going to move on to employment types and classifications under the different awards. So first of all, we've got full-time employees. So these generally work an average of 38 hours per week. They accrue annual and personal leave benefits, and as well as things like long service leave. Then we've got part-time employees. So these work less than an average of 38 hours per week. A minimum of 8 hours per week does apply for the Hospitality and Restaurant Awards. And they have reasonably predictable or regular pattern of working hours as well. And they also accrue annual leave and personal leave benefits. Then we've got casual employment. So it's a little bit different for casuals. There are slightly different rules. First of all, the job offer does not include a firm advance commitment to ongoing work. So there's no guarantee of ongoing work for casual employees. Those employees need to accept the offer knowing that there is no firm advance commitment. They receive a casual loading of 25%. They usually have a varied work roster and they have no notice of termination, and they can also decline shifts. So they can say, sorry, I'm not available during that time. It's important to remember that a Fair Work information statement is given to all new employees, whether they are casual or permanent. And for the casual employees, it does cover off on the employee choice pathway, or what was previously known as the casual conversion. So we're currently in a transitionary period relating to casual conversion or the new employee choice pathway. So casuals who are employed before the 26th of August 2024, they can request to convert to permanent employment if they have been employed for more than 12 months, unless they work for a small business and have worked a regular pattern of work for 6 months. The new employee choice pathway actually means that casuals engaged after the 26th of August this year, can provide written notice to their employer of their intent to change to permanent employment if they have been employed for at least 6 months or 12 months for small businesses, and they believe that they no longer meet the requirements of the casual employee definition. Now, for both of these examples, a response is required from the employer within 21 days and can only be refused or not accepted under reasonable business grounds. Okay, so each award has different classification requirements and streams as well to classify their employees. So it's important to take the time to understand your employees' classifications so that you can then understand the minimum pay obligations. So under the various awards, employees are classified based on the following. So the duties that they perform, the supervision and responsibility levels that applies to that employee, and any certificates or trade qualifications that are relevant to the job that they do. Then, of course, we've got apprentices. When you're looking at classifying apprentices, you need to know the level of schooling that they've completed, the age of when they started the apprenticeship. So adult apprentices have slightly different pay obligations, and what year of the apprenticeship they're in as well, because usually other than for adult apprentices, the level of pay will increase as their apprenticeship progresses. So once you have an understanding of the different classifications and which applies to each of your employees, it's essential that you review them each year to keep them updated and to keep your pay rates above board as well. Okay, moving on to ordinary hours and rates of pay under the various awards. So first of all, I want to say that the ordinary hours under these awards are mostly flexible due to the nature of hospitality. When you're thinking about hospitality, it covers a range of different premises, some that might be open at the crack of dawn to start serving coffee, and others that are open until the wee hours of the morning serving cocktails. So because of the nature of hospitality, it is very flexible. However, the Wine Industry Award does contain ordinary hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, with ordinary hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. included on weekends, specifically for cellar door staff. And it's important to understand with the wine industry, the ordinary hours also change during the vintage season, because often you will have employees working significantly longer hours and different types of hours in order to get through vintage. And then there's the Food, Beverage and Tobacco Manufacturing Award, which is slightly different again, and that has the ordinary hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, and that is 7 days per week. Finally, each award also specifies the maximum number of hours that an employee can work on any given day before attracting overtime penalties. Now, because there is quite a breadth of different awards that we are working with tonight and discussing tonight, I can't provide you the exact number of hours because they do range between each of the awards. So for some, it might be 10 hours of work on a given day, whereas others are up to 11.5 hours. Another important part of the awards are rostering arrangements. So the awards that apply to these industries all include rostering requirements that must be adhered to. Now, we've got some examples for you. These have been pulled from the various different awards that we're discussing this evening. They don't apply across the board. So I just wanted to demonstrate the variety of different arrangements that can apply. So one example is for full-time employees, where 38 hours per week can be averaged over a 4-week cycle. Another example is an employee can work 19 days of 8 hours in each 4-week period, with either a fixed or rostered day off at the beginning or the end of the week. Another one is no more than 8 days of greater than 10 hours work in a 4-week cycle. Or employees rostered to work more than 10 hours on more than 3 consecutive days must have 48 hours off after their last shift. So that's just to show you a few different examples of some of the rostering requirements that need to be met. And just as a note, these have been put in place to protect employees from being overworked, which has been an issue in this industry in the past. Now, we understand that reading awards can be overwhelming. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to share this screenshot, which shows the easiest way to navigate the rostering arrangements that apply in your award. And these are the awards. This is the award website on the Fair Work website. This example is for the Restaurant Industry Award. However, each of the awards have the same setup on the Fair Work website, with the clauses or sections listed on the left and the information displayed on the right. So if you click the link that says, number 15, ordinary hours of work and rostering arrangements, that will take you to the relevant section of the award, and you can read through all of the different requirements that you need to make sure that you're meeting, or all of the different options, I should say, for structuring your employees' hours. So once you've determined which award applies to your employees, the ordinary hours and the rostering arrangements, we can then find the relevant pay information in the award. This is just a quick screenshot of the pay guide from the Restaurant Industry Award again. It outlines each of the different classifications. When you scroll through, it also has, so this screenshot shows the full-time and part-time rates, but it'll also have a separate page for all of the casual rates and junior rates. And they also show the different rates that apply for all of the different penalties, such as weekend work, shift work, and overtime. It's important to understand these rates do not include superannuation or annual leave loading. So these need to be added on top of these figures. These are just the base hourly rates or weekly rates. And I just wanted to show you another example. This one is from the Wine Industry Award, which shows the different streams of employees that apply under this award. So you can see there's the bottling stream, cellar door sales, laboratory stream, and the vineyard stream as well. And once again, a little reminder, because we get asked this quite a bit, this does not include superannuation or annual leave loading in these rates. Okay, so knowing the award rates is one thing. We also need to know and be aware of what overtime and penalty rates apply in each award. So generally speaking, the awards require overtime penalties to be applied when a full-time or casual employee works in excess of 38 hours per week, which can be averaged over a 4-week period. When a part-time employee works more than the ordinary hours stated in their contract or their roster. And for any employee who works in excess of the maximum hours on any day, which I mentioned previously, it does vary between awards. And finally, if for any employee who works outside of the ordinary hours stated under the relevant award. As I've mentioned previously, each of the awards has slightly different requirements when it comes to the ordinary hours and rostering arrangements, which in turn affects overtime penalties. So be sure to check your obligations under the award that applies to your business. So what are the overtime penalties? Once again, this can vary between the awards, but as a general guideline, commonly the overtime penalties are, for the majority of the awards we're talking about today, 150% or time and a half for the first 2 hours. This is actually 3 hours under the Food, Beverage and Tobacco Manufacturing Award, and double time for all hours thereafter. There's also a 200% or double time loading for all hours worked on a weekend or rostered day off. Or this is actually only on Sundays for the Wine Industry Award. And this is specific to overtime, not to weekend penalties. I also want to point out that the penalties apply to the ordinary hourly rate specified under the award. It's not necessarily, so if you're paying above the award rates, you don't need to pay 150% loading on the above award rate that you pay your employee. You just need to meet the 150% of the award minimum rate. So what are some other penalties that you need to be aware of? Common ones in this industry, as we've previously mentioned, late nights, so working after 10 p.m. In the Restaurant and Hospitality Awards, things like early mornings. When I say early mornings, that could be starting at the crack of dawn, or it could be applying after midnight. Then there's also Saturday penalties, Sunday penalties, and public holidays. So if your employees are working on Saturdays, Sundays, or public holidays, higher rates will usually apply. Even if you do have ordinary hours included under the award over the weekends, that doesn't mean that they just get paid their normal hourly rate. There are those weekend penalties to be aware of. Finally, another important area to discuss is juniors, because juniors are very common working in cafes and restaurants and the like. Junior employees are paid a percentage of the adult rate that applies to their award classification. So, for example, if you have a food and beverage level 1 employee who is a 17-year-old, they will get a percentage of the adult rate of a level 1 employee. Now, once again, the ages and percentages vary between all of the awards that apply to these industries. So it's essential that you check and understand your obligations. I raise this because literally every single award had different ages and different percentages that apply, and we would be here all night if we went through all of the different examples. Finally, it's also important to understand that juniors who are employed to sell or dispense liquor in bars, so obviously they would have to be over 18 years old, they are required to be paid the adult rate in the Restaurant and Hospitality Awards as well. So if you have an 18-year-old who is selling or dispensing liquor in a bar, rather than paying them the junior rate of an 18-year-old, they would actually be bumped straight up to an adult rate. Okay, moving on to allowances. Some common allowances in these industry include a meal allowance. So this is where an employer must supply an employee with a meal or pay an employee a meal allowance if the employee is required to work overtime for more than 2 hours without being notified of that requirement on or before the previous day. So if you have people working overtime and you've given them some warning, then you wouldn't be required to pay that meal allowance. But if it's kind of last minute, then you would be either required to provide a meal or pay that allowance. Then we have the split shift allowance. So this is to cover full-time and part-time employees who are working across 2 different shifts on one day. So you might have an early morning or a lunchtime shift, and then an evening shift as well. Then we've got a tool and equipment allowance. This mainly applies to cooks. And then there are things such as the first aid allowance or the leading hand allowance. So if you have employees who are supervising other employees, and the amount of the allowance that they will get will depend on how many staff they're supervising as well. So what if you pay your employees above award rates? Do you still need to pay all of the penalties and allowances? Essentially, this depends on how your pay is structured and how much above the award you are paying. Which leads us nicely into remuneration. So, remuneration is obviously a specific and individually based topic that can cover a lot of ground. For the purpose of this session, we're going to look at an overarching view of employee salary, benefits, retention, and recruitment. So when Strawberry Seed looks at an employee's salary, we can only really take the award and relevant penalty rates into consideration. We don't take into consideration your location. So what you pay to have the same type of employee in a metro situation versus regional might be different. Then there's the market value. So what salaries, roles are being advertised. This can be done via websites such as Seek and Indeed, who, along with advertising positions and salary ranges, they also have current market data on specific jobs as well. Any current or trending incentives within your industry as well, that can vary a lot and depend on, have an effect on the remuneration. And other state or public awards that could apply within your industry as well. So, as part of deciding what you may be able to offer a new candidate, you can either look at the award rates and pay the award minimum for the hours that the employees work, or you can calculate an inclusive or above award rate for the hours that that person works, which requires a better off overall test or boot. This will confirm the employee's award classification. It checks and compares an employee's salary against the award. It at a high rate of pay, penalty rates, allowances, and loadings may be included within the hourly rate if it's also supported by a contractual offset clause, which is an offset clause that you need to have in the contract that states if the employee is receiving above award rates, that is to take into account the other penalty rates, allowances, and loadings that would otherwise apply. And it also provides the outer limits of an employee's hours in comparison to the award minimums as well. Then there's annualised wage arrangements. So the hospitality and restaurant awards actually have specific obligations relating to annualised wage arrangements. These have been implemented in response to full-time workers on annualised salaries being required to work significant amounts of overtime without properly being remunerated and then being underpaid. So, as a rule, full-time employees can be engaged on an annualised salary that is at least 25% more than the minimum wages for the work being performed. So what does that mean? This includes minimum rates for their normal hourly hours of work, split shift allowance, overtime, penalty rates, and payment for annual leave as well. So you need to calculate what would your employee be paid for the hours that they work, and then include all of those extra penalties and allowances, then add 25% on top of that. So what are some common salary mistakes? Look, to be honest, the common reasons that employers pay their staff incorrectly comes down to incorrect classification at the start of employment, classifications not updated in line with the employee's experience or responsibilities, so the kind of set and forget approach, changes to the employee's days or hours of work without the pay rates being reviewed, and the minimum award wage increases at the beginning of each financial year. Generally speaking, we've worked with over 250 small businesses around Australia. And when we have discovered underpayments occurring, it's usually because the employer does not fully understand the award or forgets to review their pay rates frequently enough. It's rarely done maliciously. So keep this in mind when you raise it with your employee and work to rectify any errors as soon as possible. On that note, the Fair Work website has a very handy pay calculator tool that can help you with this. It helps you to put in all of the details about your classifications for the employee, and it pops out their pay rates and any common penalties and loadings that would apply. Finally, talking about remuneration and retention. So looking at retention, keeping a good team is imperative. And, we recognise that within the hospitality industry, there is a large number of casual employees and even juniors that might not be around for the longest time. However, if you have your core group of team members who are full-time or part-time, that's where remuneration and keeping your employees around can be really beneficial. So it's best to talk to your team and find out what's important to them. Is it extra money? Would they prefer additional paid leave? Do they want training and development to help develop their skills? So be guided by them and understand that one size does not fit all. So you might have different benefits for different employees. You can look at things such as incentives, and above and beyond salary, offering bonuses, or even things like work-life balance, or providing childcare payments, gym memberships, entertainment vouchers, and things like that, or gift cards. Show your employees how much you value them. Okay, so what are some of the important policies that you should have in place within your business? First of all, we've got workplace health and safety. So as a business owner, you have an obligation to provide a safe workplace for your employees. It's important to have policies, procedures, and training in place when it comes to workplace health and safety. So the reason that this is important, it's not only does it keep your employees safe, but it also reduces the risk of you or your business being found negligent if there is an accident within the workplace. Then we've got sexual harassment. There has been some recent changes to legislation. As of March 2023, the Fair Work Act now prohibits sexual harassment in connection with work. This applies to employees, contractors, work experience students, volunteers, future workers, and anyone conducting a business. And the real change is that a person or company will also be liable for sexual harassment committed by an employee or an agent in connection with work, unless they can prove that they have taken all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. It's important to understand this also applies to conduct between an employee and a customer within your business. And as a small business owner, having a few policies that sit on a shelf is not enough. You really need to make sure that you are proactively educating your employees on acceptable workplace conduct. So what are some proactive steps that you can take? First of all, we recommend that you establish a clear policy. So develop and communicate a clear policy against sexual harassment that defines what is considered sexual harassment and how to report incidences of harassment and as well as the consequences for engaging in harassment. Then we've got educate employees. So train all employees on the policy, what constitutes sexual harassment and how to prevent it. This training should be ongoing and mandatory for all employees. Then we've got encourage reporting. So create a safe, confidential reporting mechanism for employees who experience sexual harassment and encourage employees to report any incidents of harassment that they witness or experience. Then we've got respond promptly. So take all reports of sexual harassment seriously and investigate them promptly. If a complaint is found to be valid, take appropriate disciplinary action against the perpetrator. Then you want to create a positive workplace culture. So foster a workplace culture that promotes respect, inclusivity, and diversity. Encourage employees to treat each other with respect and hold everyone accountable for their actions. Finally, you want to monitor and evaluate. So regularly monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the policy and training programs. Collect feedback from employees to identify areas for improvement and make necessary changes as well. Finally, we're going to go over documentation and the importance of having documentation within the workplace. So, what are some of the common issues? The nature of the hospitality industry means that most communications are verbal in nature. You're not necessarily sitting down at a desk writing emails all day, or gathering together in an office pod. As a business owner, you are considered as having the position of power in the employee-employer relationship. So this means that the onus is on you to prove that you have followed fair and due process in the event of performance issues or termination. And having a paper trail is essential to protect yourself from possible complaints or issues in the future. At Strawberry Seed, one of the common things that we say is everything is fine until it's not. So the best thing that you can do to try and prevent hassle in the future is by documenting everything, or as much as possible. So what should you document? Absolutely, you should be documenting any changes to employment conditions. So this includes things like the employment type, so permanent versus casual, pay rates, changes to pay rates, changes to working hours, any changes to working conditions. Then you should also be documenting any discussions relating to performance issues or behavioural issues. You should be documenting any warnings that may occur. and any leave that is being taken or leave requests as well. So documentation, in terms of how to document it, you've got a few different options. First of all, we've got the employment contract, so what you provide at the beginning of employment. Then you might be sending email correspondence to your employees for some of those bigger, more important issues that arise. You can also use text messages. This might be quite common amongst the hospitality industry where you don't have workplace email. And then you can also take notes. So documentation doesn't always have to be a formal letter. If you have a discussion with an employee about a performance issue, it's a good idea to follow it up with a summary text just to make sure that you've got it in writing. It can also be emails between supervisors or administrative staff and yourself, or even notes in your diary or calendar, especially if it's related to smaller instances of maybe performance issues, someone turning up late, so those smaller incidences that might occur that don't necessarily need a big note to be taken. You can just jot down a note of it. And having this paper trail, it just allows you to reflect on the issues at hand, consider the severity of them, and make a decision on what the next step is, especially if you've got, oh, I've made a note of, Jane being late today, and, next time I'll make sure that I talk to her and I'll raise it with her, and then you jot down that you've spoken to her about that. And then if it still continues, then you can look back and say, oh yeah, that's right, I did talk to her and it's happened this many times. And that helps you to make that decision on what the next step is. So in the event that you receive an unfair dismissal claim, that documentation can strengthen your case in proving that you have acted fairly and reasonably and followed due process. So providing feedback to your employee, giving them the opportunity to improve their performance or behaviour before you made the call to terminate their employment. And taking these steps will help you to avoid looking like old mate over here with a sore head, trying to navigate a complaint without having evidence of all of the chances that you've given to your employee who you've just terminated. Okay, so what are the key takeaways from this session? First of all, it is your responsibility to know which instrument or award applies to you and your business. Secondly, get to know the nitty-gritty parts of the instrument and how they compare to your employment agreement and practices. So this is so that you can understand the application of penalty rates, loadings, allowances to your industry. Then you want to make sure that you're protecting your employees and your businesses with OHS and sexual harassment policies. And finally, don't discount the importance of documentation. Make sure that you review your contracts, HR policies, salaries, etc., to ensure that you're compliant. And an HR company such as Strawberry Seed Consulting can assist with this. Just like to take this opportunity before we jump into questions to let you know about some upcoming and previous webinars that we have held. So as you can see on the screen, we've got one talking about personal leave, difficult workplace conversations. We've also got some recent ones on improving team communication and parental leave. So all of these recordings can be found on the Strawberry Seed website in the advice videos section. They're a really, really good tool for any employers out there. You might find a little gem in there that helps you with one of your employees. And upcoming courses. So we've actually got a webinar booked in for next month with the lovely Frances, who is hosting us today. And she's going to be taking you through understanding and managing psychosocial risks and hazards in the workplace, which is a really hot topic at the moment. So I recommend that you register for that one. It will be on November the 20th at 7:30 p.m. On Australian Eastern Standard Time. Okay, now we've got plenty of time for questions.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. That was quite the insight, and it's a little bit tricky when you've got so many awards to try and cover, and they're also vastly different in
Exactly.
many different spaces. So Yeah, we'll hang out for a moment. We don't have any questions as yet, but obviously if anyone does have any, please pop them into the Q&A, or potentially use the raise hand application. We'll hang around for one more moment just in case there is anything that anyone would like to confirm or clarify. And of course, as Helen said, we do have another, well, the final webinar. It's not a 101 series, but we've got our final webinar in November, which, as you said, will be me talking about psychosocial risks and hazards. So last chance for any questions, if anyone has any that they'd like to ask. No. All right. Well,
We'll also take the opportunity to let people know that in the coming months, towards the end of the year, we'll be releasing the exciting new training opportunities for the new year as well. There's some exciting things coming up in 2025. We'll leave you with that little chestnut.
Absolutely. And you can follow us on all the socials, and that will keep you up to date with all the little nuggets that are coming out next year.
Exactly.
Look, Helen, thank you very much. That was such a good presentation. Really do appreciate your time tonight.
Pleasure.
But we'll close off tonight if there's no further questions. Thank you all very much for attending. Have a good night.